Poke the Bear is brought to you by PrizePicks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 310, presented by PrizePicks. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, there's not a whole lot going on, so what have you been doing the last couple of days?
Yeah, we're here to talk about like Riley Tufte, right? And Patrick Brown being back with the team. Like, that's it. Nothing else happened, I'm pretty sure.
I believe so. I have to just... No, I looked at the roster. There's a little bit more to talk about. Ty, considering the fact that we've been talking for weeks, months, it feels like, about really not a whole lot going on with this team, I feel like the monkey paw is now in full effect of like, oh, we've got too much to talk about because in the span of, a couple of days, not even just focusing in on Friday, Bruins tore it all down, more or less. We can talk a little bit later on about how far this rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it is. But, man, there's a lot of franchise stalwarts, guys that have been here for 7, 9, 16 years who are no longer here. So I'm sure for anyone listening to this, they've already have heard most of the news, but some of the guys that are now traded away by the Bruins, Captain Brad Marchand, defenseman Brennan Carlo, center Charlie Coyle, forward Trent Frederick, forward Justin Brazeau. Mark McLaughlin was moved in a minor deal. Am I missing anyone? I feel like there's been so much going on that I feel like someone's slipping through the cracks, but I believe that was all of them.
I believe that's everybody. Yes.
So, Ty, and we'll dive into each individual trade and what this means for the Bruins both this year, which get ready to learn Michael Misa, buddy, we hope. I don't know if it's going to be that bad, but overall, looking at what Don Sweeney did this past week in terms of looking at this seller's market, seeing where this team was going, which was not very far, what was your overall opinion of how the Bruins tackled this trade deadline?
I think that they picked a direction, right? And that is, I think, what's most important is that, there was a lot of, uncertainty, I guess, is the way I would say it. Entering yesterday, I thought, okay, they're going to make one or two more trades. And then the morning kind of progresses, the afternoon progresses. And we're sitting here going, oh, wait a minute. Are they making a move? Are they going to stand pat here? Are they going to just say, hey, we traded Frederick and Brazeau and everything else is fine? And I think that would have been a disappointment. If they did that, I would have said, no, that sucks. You gotta do more than that. And then they went into hyperdrive, between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. So I think picking a direction is important. And they did do that. And so I have to respect that. Now they have to nail the draft picks. But I think that was what I found most telling is that Don Sweeney said he was going to be cautious. Turns out he's very aggressive. He was very aggressive in the other direction. But I do think that, that is a sign of a confident GM, one who, has his convictions and is going with it. And this was sort of always the fear that I had in the back of my mind with this team and with this deadline was that Sweeney GM's like a GM who's like, oh, I still want to sneak into the playoffs if I can. Like, no, he abandoned that with Friday, with the trades that he made. And so from that standpoint, I do respect it. Now they have to maximize it, but I do respect the gumption, so to speak, to go out and make those kind of moves that are definitely polarizing, difficult decisions.
Yeah, it's almost like I remember when Don Sweeney spoke to us in the media on February 23rd, where he more or less mentioned, McAvoy's probably not coming back, Lindholm's not coming back. We kind of saw that they were waving the white flag of the season. I remember taking like an exhale of like, all right, they're not going to be like one of these teams that's just going to be swimming against the tide and trying to make the playoffs, even though what we've seen for months on end signals a team that just doesn't have it this year. And, as much as I think you wake up today and recording this Saturday morning, still in a little bit of shock of just the guys that were moved, these guys that have been here for a long time that are institutional players. Brad Marchand's getting 63 put up to the rafters in a couple of years. And like Brennan Carlo and Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, these are all guys that have been here for a long time, been a part of some unbelievable seasons, and we wish all of them the best. There is some of that shock that you still have, like processing it the next day. And as you said, it was a lot of waiting around being like, it's going to be Frederick and Brazeau, which I think you've mentioned this before. That's the easy part. Those two guys that weren't going to be here moving forward. Like a lot of GMs could see those as guys that are naturally going to be assets you move. But to then have the whirlwind of like Coyle, it was at like 210. Marchand was at like 301, and then it was like 303 was Brendan Carlo. To lean into that and kind of rip the Band-Aid off and take advantage of what is clearly a seller's market and recouping a lot of draft picks, younger players, and just shaking things up is very bold from the Bruins in that respect. And again, it's another one of a thing of exhale where it's like, all right, they kind of know what they need to do. They had to rip off the Band-Aid. They had to accept that they need to really shake things up here. And as you said, there's now a lot of risk involved with that, right? It's no guarantee of where this team's going to be 2-3 years down the road, but it was a necessary, inevitable step they had to do at some point, right? Like, even if this team built off of last year and you're still looking at buying and trying to make the playoffs this year, sooner or later the bill was going to come due in terms of bottoming out, having a rough year, having regression, having things go haywire. It just happened to be this year. I don't think a lot of us expected that to be the case, but it's almost like also if you're the Bruins and you know that 3-4 years down the line you needed to have this kind of tear down season, might as well do it right now where a lot of stuff's going haywire. The market is where it is, where you could really take advantage of selling off pieces, and you can ideally get back at it as the cap jumps up. So I look at it that way too. If the Bruins were identifying, if there was a time to do it, where especially we still have guys in our prime and we can hopefully try to rebuild around them the next couple of years. I do give credit for them being bold in doing that, because if you are just trying to drag things out of your team, like, Pittsburgh, which sold a few pieces, but they're not moving the needle, or like Nashville, which is just doubling down as to like, yeah, we suck now. We know we thought we were going to be good, but maybe we'll be good next year. Let's keep on trying. It's like, that's a sign of a team that is going to be in no man's land. So, yeah, I give credit for them for seeing what was out there and taking advantage and striking when the iron's hot.
100%. And I also think that, when the market is the market and it's favorable to you, let's be real. Let's be real that Charlie Coyle, his value to Colorado is greater than what his value would be to the Bruins for the remainder of this year.
Absolutely.
And next season. And for the Bruins, William Zellers, a prospect currently playing, he's a top 5 prospect by most accounts in the Colorado pipeline. Colorado, obviously a team that's traded a lot of picks. So maybe not the deepest pool in the NHL. So maybe you dock him a little bit there in terms of being a top 5 prospect for that franchise. But nevertheless, like Zellers in a second round pick is more in line with where the Bruins are than a 33-year-old Charlie Coyle entering the last year of his deal next year. And so you're playing the long game, right? Brandon Carlo, you love what he does when he's healthy, but he's approaching 30. The market for defensemen was really strong. Jake Wallman, a guy who got traded for future considerations, essentially, a year ago, goes for a first-round pick, and the Bruins probably look at that, and I asked Don Sweeney about this. The Bruins look at that market and go, all right, defensemen are going, and we got a good one who's on a good contract. Yes, we like the player. Yes, we like the contract, but we got a chance to get a high second-round pick in Fraser Minton, who is considered the second best prospect in the Toronto pipeline, and you have a chance to get a first-round pick. It's like, okay, again, that pick and Fraser Minton are more in line with where the Bruins need to go than Brandon Carlo with his injury history approaching 30. Like, that is more in line with what Carlo than Carlo right now. And it took the Bruins a while to get to that point. You kept prying the window open, no, we're still competitive. I think 2024 was the most masterful, magician act yet in terms of keeping the window open. But like, it's over. And that is what I find impressive, is that impressive may be too strong, but like the willingness and the confidence to say it's over. Like, they've never done that, they've never done that under Don Sweeney, where they've been able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, you stink. And this isn't like a quick fix. Like, we stink. And so I think that they made future appropriate moves, right? I think particularly with Brazeau, with Frederick, with Carlo, and with Coyle, like, they looked at those guys and said, yeah, we like them, but like they're not part of the long-term solution. The picks, the prospects, diminished values with certain guys. Like that's what we got to hammer in on right now. And I think that's what I like about it. And so I think that, I think another thing too, sidebar with trading Carlo, like you're saying, yeah, we're trading to a division rival, but we don't care. Like whatever, you're giving us a first round pick and your second best prospect. Like that's enough for us. And so, I not limiting yourself in that regard, I think is also an important, lesson, I guess, that Don Sweeney has apparently learned since last year, I would say.
Yeah, and I think like you going bold this trade deadline, it also just puts you in a much better spot. Because let's say they just did what we expected them to do, and were conservative and sold the players that we thought they were going to, right? And Frederick and Brazeau. And I like both of those trades, right? Like you getting a second for Frederick, who's banged up, you probably weren't going to re-sign anyway, and is in the middle of a pretty down year. I'll take that because I think the Bruins should get as many second round picks as possible because they love that little juncture of the draft anyway. So good move there. Then Brazeau, you bring back Lauko, you bring back not bring back, but bring in Marat Husnudinov. Hasn't produced at the NHL level yet, but good numbers in the KHL. A really high motor guy. So TBD what exactly his ceiling is, but again, I think we're seeing clearly they're targeting high motor players, which wish you did that a little bit earlier because, like, what do you know? You have a lot of guys now that do play with a lot of pace, which is encouraging. But if those were your only moves, I would give them a thumbs up. But would that put you in the best spot to really kind of turn things around the next couple of years when you still have Charlie Coyle and Kahlo, and let's say they just kept Marchand thinking that they'd eventually work a deal out, and you run that risk anyway. But to then make those moves where you now have another first-round pick in 2026 and what should be a pretty deep draft, even though I don't think Toronto is necessarily going to be they're not going to be a team's first-round pick, but first-round pick nonetheless, another second-round pick, bringing in, as you said, a guy like Fraser Minton, who a lot of people in Toronto really like in terms of he's got a really high motor, work ethic, untapped potential as an offensive player, probably more of a middle six, third, like a really good third line player, maybe. But a guy that I think is very easy to map out what his floor is. And it shouldn't just be like a fourth line grinder. Bringing a guy like that, Zellers, as you said, is a guy that if you can score, you can score. And it clearly seems like he's, I think, already overshooting his draft projection as a third round player. And then even like a guy like Middlestat, which is a different kind of approach there in the middle six. TBD what he brings, but you can see the Bruins want to see what they have in a player like that. If you put him with Pasternak for a couple of games, see what you can do with a natural playmaker. So I think taking that extra step and being bold and moving out these players does just put you in a better spot moving forward, where yes, you could either stay the course and replenish your pipeline just by holding on to those draft picks and letting guys like Zellers and Minton and everyone marinate and get better, but you can also use a few of those draft picks to flip them for NHL talent if you want to do that as well. Like it just feels like they put themselves in such a better position to kind of be bold and give themselves options, whether it's playing the long game or doing a little bit of both as well. I don't think they're going to trade every single one of these draft picks now, but they're in a spot where they're much better equipped to kind of retool on the fly here as they move forward.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think this is probably the best way that the Bruins could have undone what was going way too deep into the physicality and size pool a year ago. Like you mentioned all those players, right? Like what do they all have in common at the NHL level for the most part? Their speed, their speed, their skill. You got to coax it out of them a little bit, you're going to have to put them in the right situation. Do they all project as centers or is someone moving to the wing? How do you figure that out? But, Hutsadinov, like you bring him in, right? And like, okay, you can't use him the same way Minnesota used him, right? Like Minnesota used him a lot of defensive zone, kind of heavy lifting. Like, no, he's a speed and skill guy. He's a high octane energy kind of guy. You got to put him in the right spots or else you're going to be making the same mistake that Minnesota made and you're not getting the most out of that player. And so that's that's the new challenge, I think, for the Bruins, is that you bring in guys that are imperfect players, unfinished products, whatever you want to call it. You have to coach them like that. You can't say you got to be this, this, and this before we play you. It's like, nope. You're not that team anymore. You are more of a develop on the fly kind of team. You have to put them in situations to maximize their game. And this is something that I think the Bruins did a really good job with Justin Brazeau, a player who they acknowledge as, hey, your skating's not great. You know, you got the smarts, but you don't always take the right route or the best read. You know, sometimes you kind of lumber your way out of position, but you're a killer in front of the net. You know how to get low, deflect pucks, keep plays alive, win your battles. So just do that really well. Like, this is sort of like they got to apply that kind of mindset to some of these guys now to get the most out of them. And so that's the challenge here for Joe Sacco. You know, like, hey man, like, I know you're an interim head coach. I know you're fighting for your own career here, but like, you got to coach like a guy who's got to bring some players along now. And this is the first time the Bruins are asking their coaching staff to do that since 2006, 2007, and 2007, 2008. Like, they haven't asked this out of their guys in a long time. And so their mentality has to follow, but I like the commitment here to bringing in more upside, so to speak, than guys that we know are already at their peak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll have more to talk about with this trade deadline, but before we do that, take a quick break here from our friends over at PrizePicks. Football season might be over, but there's still plenty to look forward to on the sports calendar. So hit the ice this hockey season with PrizePicks, the best place to win cash while watching your favorite sports. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash as you run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Think Connor McDavid will get more than 1 goal next week? Will Austin Matthews hit for more than 5 shots on goal? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Don't miss your chance to cash in as the league's best fight for playoff positioning. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks it, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite hockey players with players from basketball, baseball, esports, and much more. There's no shortage of ways to participate in PrizePicks. This week, I'm looking at the hockey board and selecting David Pastrnak for more than 1 goal and Brady Tkachuk for more than 4 hits. It's really that easy. So download the PrizePick app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the PrizePicks app to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Shout out once again to our good friends over at PrizePicks. Ty, I was gonna go like through each individual trade, but maybe more as a bigger picture thing. What would you give the overall grade of Don Sweeney and the Bruins as to how they did handle this trade deadline? Because I feel like a lot of people are in agreement that a lot of these trades did net the Bruins a good return, but curious as to what your overall grade for this deadline was.
I'm gonna give it a B. I'm gonna give it a B. I would give it an A, but I'm sure we're gonna talk about why it's not an A in a moment here. This was a trade deadline where I think you navigated in terms of the future of the team, and I don't believe that there were half measures here. You know, like they entered the deadline saying we're going to trade basically anybody who isn't bolted down as a core member long term. Like, is there any player that they kept that you sort of look at and go, yeah, you should have traded him? You know, it's probably one guy, maybe 2 guys, but like other than that, like they maximize the deadline, you know, without completely abandoning the final 20 games of their season to a certain degree, and you know, having enough bodies and enough building blocks that you want to see more of down the road here. And so I think for that reason, I give it a B. It could have been an A, but I think working within the constraints and the time limits you have, like, you know, that final hour was a mad dash. And when you have those kind of mad dashes, like, it can get kind of shitty before you know it. All of a sudden you're like, oh, that trade blows, actually, you know? So yeah. I think the Coyle trade and the Carlo trade, they border on A for me. Like they really do. I think when you look at the assets you're bringing in, and again, just the realization that, we've had these white whale thoughts on this podcast, and you and I in real life, we said, oh, well, Barkov's he's heading towards free agency. Nope.
Draisaitl, baby.
Draisaitl. Oh, nope. Sidney Crosby, maybe? No. And then it happens again. We hadn't talked about this on the podcast, but we had talked about, you know what? If you can't get a center, throw a big bag of money at Mikko Rantanen. Well, that's gone now, right? And so I think for the Bruins, the realization that the best and most sustainable way to build a team is through the draft, right? And so when you add second round picks and you add first round picks, you got at least one, maybe two. It's a realization that the way that you're trying to stay alive, so to speak, is not working. This is the way you got to do it. And so I like it from that standpoint. It could be an A, but it's a B.
Yeah, I'm going to do B+. And before I do that, also, the Bruins did release a statement about Brad Marchand getting traded. So the expected flowers you get from Cam Neely, Don Sweeney, but also Charlie Jacobs gave a statement. And at the end of it, he said, in quote, Cam, Don, and the hockey operations team have my full support as they made these very difficult decisions, which we collectively believe will set our franchise up for a new era of success in the future. Our goal remains unchanged to be a Stanley Cup championship-driven organization. Together, we are charting a course for the next century. So it seems like ownership gave the sign-off. I also think, I'm not maybe reading the tea leaves, that I think Don Sweeney and Cam Neely are going to be here to see what they can do to untangle this mess from this past year and also try to build that foundation. I don't know if that's like the full vote of confidence, but if you were to ask me who's going to be the GM going into the offseason, I still think it is Don Sweeney. I don't know if you agree, but...
100. I completely agree. Completely.
Yeah.
There has been nothing that tells you that they would veer off course here and make a change there. He's been completely public in his defense of Cam Neely and Don Sweeney. And I don't think you let him make those trades yesterday if you don't have full confidence that he is your GM. Go back to 2015. The Bruins did handcuff Peter Chiarelli. They told him, you couldn't trade everything you want to trade. Like, you got to work within these restrictions here. Clearly, there were no restrictions yesterday when you're allowed to trade the captain and then two secondary support leaders. Like, there's no restrictions, clearly. The only restrictions are from Sweeney himself, who basically made it known to teams that 88, 73, and 1 were not for sale. Like that, like everyone else will listen, but like those three guys are not for sale.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I'll give a grade. I'll do B+. Because I agree. I think almost all those trades, I think, were great moves by the Bruins. Like even Frederick getting a second-round pick for where his value was. For Brazeau, a guy that you weren't going to re-sign anyway. And again, TBD what Hushnadinov, if I get that name correctly, what his ceiling is at the NHL level. But a guy we're taking a flyer on. You took a flyer on Brazeau, who is a guy in the ECHL, became a somewhat useful asset. We'll see what Hushnadinov can do. And Lauko, I think, will be as advertised. If anything, you bring back Lauko for the vibes, right? Like I think you need a guy like that in the room. Good buddy with Jeremy Swayman as well. So I do think that maybe is more of a vibes thing. But when he's on, his game brings a lot of pace, a lot of energy. So I like that move as well for just guys that weren't going to be here anyway. And then you look at Carlo, a first-round pick, which I think is key, especially for next year. Which again, we're a long ways away from it, but the 26 draft does seem to be pretty deep and one that it's worth having a couple first-round picks in there. Minton's a guy that I'm excited about because I think he has a really high floor and can impact this team in the near future. And then, I look at Coyle as probably the one that I like the most, and that's not saying that I'm a Casey Middlestat fan. I'm very curious to see how he pans out here, but I think you look, as you said, Ty, where Coyle was in his career and how much he was going to impact this team. I think we've seen where his greatest contributions were, whether it be in 2019 on that third line, last year being a top 6 centerman. Like, was he going to move the needle this year or next year for this team? And if you're the Bruins, it's like, well, if we can flip that for a second-round pick, which, again, the more second-round picks you have, the better. A guy like Will Zellers, who's putting up 37 goals in 40 games in the USHL and already looks like a guy that maybe down the road, again, a long ways to go, but could be like a middle 6 scoring winger. You'll take that. And then for Middlestad, it's like a guy who, yes, there's, you hear that he's soft, that he's inconsistent, what have you. He also has had 2 years with 59 points and 57 points. So, like, if you put him in a top 6 role, give him power play reps, and he's as gifted of a playmaker as has been the profile in him for a while. Maybe he's the next kind of like Zaka-ish player where you can have a guy that can consistently be a 55, 65 point guy. And it works out that way. There's no guarantee there, but I give the Bruins credit for looking at an asset like Coyle, whose I think greatest contributions were a few years ago, and switching things up, bringing in a different profile, a player that's 6 years younger, and also getting draft capital out of it. So as a whole, I really like it. Just comes down to the Marchand thing. And I think that's probably what we'll pivot to next in terms of the return. Because as soon as they announced that he's going to Florida, I'm like, all right, like I don't know what first they're getting. Is Florida acquiring another first and giving it to the Bruins? Are they getting Mackie Sams, however you say his name, Samsiskevich, like a middle 6 winger?
Mackie Sams,
like,
baby.
Yeah, Mackie Sams. Like I was like, at first I was like, are they gonna give him like Lundell or something? Like what the fuck? Like what is going on? I know that's like, again, when your brain is racing, like you're thinking all these crazy things. As soon as Carlo got traded, I was like, they're not getting like Matthew Nyes or some shit, right? And I knew that's like insane, and I'm sure there'll be comments being like, no, idiot. But in the moment, your brain is literally just racing, trying to think of who these teams have that can offer up these players with term. But for Marchand, yeah, what's your overall take on it? Because at first it's like shock in terms of just the fact that Brad Marchand has now been traded from the Bruins, but then you look at the return and you're like, I don't like that. But has it changed at all in terms of factoring in the trade protections, the injury, stuff like that? Where do you kind of stand on it?
Yeah, I really would have loved a solidified first round pick. And if I'm not getting that, I want fewer conditions. That's probably my biggest takeaway. I don't think there should be 2 conditions. I think if you're a defending Stanley Cup champion and you want Brad Marchand and you have the LTIR cap space that you do have, and the Bruins are eating half of Marchand's salary right now to make this trade happen, I have to look at it from the scope of, okay, so you're eating 50%, you're trading him, you're trading your captain, who you want to re-sign. You said you want to re-sign him, so I have to imagine that you did want to re-sign him. And you're trading him to a rival. And okay, now there's conditions on the pick as well. Now he has to play in 50% of the games, and they have to make it to the 3rd round in the Atlantic bracket, which in my opinion features the 3 best teams, or 3 of the 4 best teams in the conference. So no sure thing on any of that. And so I just think there's one too many conditions. I do think it should have been just Marchand playing in the playoffs. Or playing in the majority of their first round games. I think that or whatever, however long the run is, he plays in let's say 40% of the games or 50, whatever it is. So I think there's a little bit too much in terms of conditions on that trade where it's like you're kind of letting the Panthers have their cake and eat it too. It's kind of terms. Yeah, that's the only thing I don't like. But on the other side of it, we have to acknowledge that the suitors kind of dropped off the table pretty quickly. Colorado made their move for Brock Nelson. Dallas got Rantanen. Vegas got Riley Smith.
Yeah.
And did they want to get deeper into the first round pick pool? They're not afraid to trade picks, but like you look at what they've traded, like they've traded a lot in the last 8 years, or 7 years, whatever it is, 7 years. And then I look at a team like LA, right? Like LA, we know LA was in on Brad Marchand. Did he want to go there? Was that too far? So does that change things? B, let's say he was willing to go there for whatever reason, or the Bruins wanted to send him there. LA is looking like they're going to be locked into a first round matchup with Edmonton for the 4th year in a row.
Of course.
Is a 36-year-old injured Brad Marchand enough to bridge the gap between LA and Edmonton? And is LA going, yeah, we'll give you Brant Clark or Quinton Byfield or a first round pick? Like, they're probably looking at it realistically like that. We'd love to do it, but we don't think that's enough to bridge the gap. And so were they hamstrung into Florida being the only team? Like, and if so, that's going to mess up the return a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's one of those things too, where, yeah, I think it's the conditions that get me, right? Even if it was like a first, but like, it's like locked in. If it's like a 28 first, I'd be like, hell, like who knows what Florida might be underwater in 2028 at this point. I mean, they don't even have an arena at that point in 28 with that team and where they're going. But if you want to bank on that as a future return, I'd be better with that than even looking at just the conditions. Because you look at where Marchand is and he's injured. And again, that's probably the biggest determinant as to what has impacted this return.
How hurt do you think he is? Sorry. How hurt? Like, he must be hurt if the conditions are that heavy.
Well, they're also saying, right, that I forget who it was, whether it was John Buccigross or someone said it's an upper body injury below the neck. So I'm like, again, this is literally just speculating, but is it like a separated shoulder? Is it a broken collarbone? Like, is it something like that, you're going to be out for a month and you're still going to have to work your way back even after that, right? Like, that could be something that could scare a lot of teams away. So I almost feel like it's the biggest thing that has impacted the return for the Bruins is probably the injury, which sucks, but it's kind of that's what happens, right? If he doesn't get knocked into the boards by Joseph in that meaningless game against the Penguins, and I'm not saying like, oh, the Bruins should have just put him in bubble wrap. Like, shit happens, it's hockey, but I do feel like that was probably the biggest thing that did impact the return from being just a little bit better. And as far as the Bruins and what they got for him, which it sucks because that was it's funny. I think a lot of Bruins fans agree, even if like you're sad that Coyle's gone, Kahlo's gone, all these guys, if you got like a future first, like locked in and Mackie Sam's, however you want to call his
Mackie
name.
Sam's, baby.
Yeah. If you got that, you'd be like, okay, like they got a 22-year-old guy who's already got 30 points this year, and they've got a future first. Like, all right, you like where they're going. And it's almost like the Marchands, like the meme of the person that draws the horse, and it's like beautifully detailed, and then it gets to the head, and it's like a little smiley face, and it's drawn like shit. I feel like Bruins fans are like that probably, where all right, Marchand was the biggest domino to fall, and you're expecting that to be at least the most impactful return, and for it to be like that, I understand why even if probably a lot was working against the Bruins in terms of the return or in terms of the injury, trade protections, the destinations. You only had, I think, so many options there, which is, I think, more of what I'm coming around to as opposed to, I think, the initial sticker shock of like, what the hell is this? Because I think a lot of people were probably in that boat and took a while to process it. Doesn't make it any better now thinking about it because it still sucks that that's the ultimate return, but it does seem like it is what it is.
Yeah, my only concern would be, did the Bruins get all
spooked over,
all emotional and affectionate and whatever term you want to use about Brad Marchand, and they didn't take a better deal because they wanted to respect his wishes and where he wanted to go? That'd be my only concern. Like Marchand plays with Reinhart and Bennett at the Four Nations. Obviously, Florida, it's a nice place to play. I don't like walking through the mall parking lot to go cover the games, but you don't have to worry about that when you're a player. You have a parking spot.
You don't like reenacting Robert Muldoon avoiding 7-foot iguanas.
It's unbelievable.
It's
it's insane how what a crazy place that is. Now, with all that said, I don't know if this for certain. I want to say his like dad lives down there or something like that. I don't know why I feel that way. I feel like there's something like
every dad.
Yeah, I don't know, so maybe there was, but my only thing is I just hope that I hope they didn't reject a better deal to make him happy, because that's not how you complete an aggressive retool. You do it by being emotionless and thinking what's best for your team. Go back. We talk about this team ad nauseum. I understand that, but when the Capitals traded Orlov to the Bruins, do you think they wanted to do that? No, but they did it because they realized, that this is who's going to give us the best return and the best chance. And we did it that way. And so that'd be my only concern, is that, and that's why I asked Don Sweeney, did he kind of say he wanted to go there, or what happened there? And kind of a non-answer, as a lot of Sweeney questions kind of are. Doesn't want to play his hand too doesn't want to show his cards, too much. But that'd be the only thing that kind of would make me bothered to know that if that comes out along the lines.
And I also feel like in terms of grading the Marchand trade, I don't think we're going to give the full grade until not just like the playoffs, but until like July 1st, where we find out where Marchand goes, right? Because like I for one am not buying into like, oh, he's just going to re-sign back. Like I was on the Sports Hub with Joe Murray last night, and he asked me like a percentage wise, and I was like 10%. Like I just don't feel like that happens. I know it's like fun to think about, but I just don't feel like even a guy that is so ingrained into the culture, once you have that separation and you go somewhere else, and maybe the grass is always greener on the other side of he's chilling at the Rainforest Cafe at the Sawgrass Mills Mall. He's like, oh, it's pretty sweet on the beach in Fort Lauderdale. Like, oh, I could close out my career here or going somewhere else. I think once you aren't tethered to that organization, the only one you've ever known, I think it does broaden your horizons a bit moving forward. So, I think you're not going to be able to give the full grade until one, you see how he is in the playoffs and how the Panthers do, whether you find out what pick you're getting. Because I think it's maybe easier to stomach it if you do have a first round pick locked in moving forward. But also like, where does he come back? Does he sign elsewhere? And I think especially what his next contract is. If he goes somewhere else and it's a 40-year deal at $6 million, 5.5, you're like, I could see why the Bruins wouldn't want to do that move, right? It's almost like the Tampa Bay where they let Stamkos walk, didn't get anything for him, but he signs 4 years, $8 million, and Tampa's like, this sucks, but we didn't want to give him that contract. Now, if Marchand goes somewhere else and he signs 3 years at $3 million, I'd be like, I probably would have done that deal. I would have taken even a declining Marchand at that price point, at the chance of him scoring 20 goals and being a veteran leader for you, as opposed to letting him walk for a conditional pick. So I think that is the other shoe that has to drop, is where Marchand goes moving forward, and most importantly, what that contract is. If he goes elsewhere at a contract that I think the Bruins weren't going to match, it is what it is. Good for Marchand for getting that value. He's been on a bargain bin deal for a long, long time, so all the power to him. Hope he ends his career on a high note, goes to the Olympics, all that stuff. If it's a deal like around $3 million, which I saw was tossed out there, that's not that great. I would probably then be like, was this really necessary then, if that is the case? But we won't know that until July. But I do think another shoe has to drop before we get the full scope of this move and the decisions that played out into it.
Yeah, I sorry to go back to this. I have no idea why I feel like his dad lives in Florida. Maybe it's just because we saw them walking down the road in Florida during the playoffs in 2024. I don't know why
one person was like, "Is that the guy in the Bruins?" Like, yep, they're all here. They're all walking this street.
She was like an Eastern European girl who was like also from Canada. It was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, yes, I think, I mean, I have to imagine that the biggest holdup that prevented Marchand and the Bruins from signing an extension was term, right? Like, I imagine that the Bruins probably entered it and said, hey, we want you to be like Bergeron and like Chara. Take these 1-year deals, low money, high bonus dollar. It'll allow us to build a better team around you, blah, 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 blah. And I imagine Marchand was probably like, well, I've been on the best deal in hockey for you guys for almost a decade.
Years.
So no, I want some security. I want some term. I think especially, Connor, going through a concussion a year ago in the playoffs, having an injury this year, being 5'9" and 180 pounds, being in great shape, being a model of durability, but you are one hit away from all of that going out the window, and I imagine you want some security and you want to feel taken care of. And if you're not going to get that, well then, okay, like, decision has been made for you, but I have a hard time imagining the Bruins are quibbling over the dollar amount as much as they are the years. Like, they have the money. They have the money in their coffers for the next couple of years to make that kind of deal happen. Your core pieces are locked up. It's not like, oh shit, there's a $10 million contract around the corner. Like, no, all their guys are locked up. So I do think it comes back to the term, and Marchand maybe not drinking the Kool-Aid of a Bergeron or a Chara in terms of that. Just do 1-year deals, which, hey, that's his right. And it seems like that's the case, like based on the way Don Sweeney spoke about it. There are codes that Don Sweeney kind of speaks in that when you cover him enough, you learn what they are. When he says, I'll never begrudge a player for thinking, their value is this, it means they're not close on dollars. That's or term. It's not like, oh, we don't like him. It's, hey, he thinks he's worth this, but we don't. So we're not going to do it. Like, that's what that coded language is. And that's, I think, what it meant in this negotiation.
It's like Don Sweeney mentioning yesterday about the 2022-23 team. Like, yeah, but there's some things we'd like to change and do differently. Yeah, it's like, when they didn't fuck up the goalie rotation in the playoffs and play all the wrong guys. Little coded language there for how that went, but I digress. We don't need to poke at old.
What a fun hockey game! Sorry, I can't resist it.
Should have known that everything was going downhill after that. But Ty, looking forward now at the Bruins, and it's funny. There's 18 games left, and if they kept the same roster, it would be the longest 18 games ever. I am somewhat excited just to see these new players, even though I don't expect them to win a lot of these games. But also, I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think the more the best way to maximize this terrible year when you've already got all these assets is keep on taking for a higher draft pick. That would be the cherry on top if you get an actual impactful top 6 talent in this draft. So that is definitely something worth keeping tabs on. But for the Bruins long term, Don Sweeney was asked, Emily Benjamin asked him, like, do you view this as like a legit rebuild now as opposed to a retool on the fly? And he says, no, we didn't tear it all down. We didn't burn it all down. We still have pieces. So from his opinion, they're more of a retool and they still have pieces. And it is true. You still have Pasternak. You still have McAvoy. You still have Swayman, who you hope bounces back. And you've got good pieces around them. Lindholm, Hampus Lindholm. I don't know how you want to view Elias Lindholm, but they have guys around them. But still a whole lot of work to do, and you got to hit on a lot of things moving forward. Where are you with the Bruins in terms of where you tab where they are right now? Is this actually a retool? Do you think this is more of a rebuild situation here moving forward? Does it depend on what the choices are in the next 3 months?
I don't think it's going to be more than I think this is going to be the low point, if that makes sense. Like I don't think the Bruins are a team that necessarily wants to be a team that's fighting in that gooey middle, so to speak, for wild card berths. Like they view themselves as a team that if they make the right moves here in the offseason, they can be right back to being battling for the division. And I also think that they sort of understand where the Atlantic Division may be. It's like I think we're witnessing what's going to be the case for the next couple of years here. I think this is now Toronto's division to lose. Florida, you like what they have, but they are getting a little long in the tooth there. Aaron Ekblad is up for a new contract as well. Sam Bennett is up for a new contract. Makachuk, we're seeing the toll of the way he plays, and back-to-back long, deep playoff runs are taking their toll.
Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky is anymore now.
And now the safety net behind Bobrovsky of Spencer Knight is now no longer in the picture. Now, Spencer Knight wasn't living up to his draft stock, which he was 10th overall pick, 15th overall?
Something. He was wicked high for a goalie,
so he's now gone. He's in Chicago now. So, like, they are the Panthers are very 2019 Bruins-esque right now. We're like, okay, like the window's open, but like you got to start getting some good value plays in here along the way as well. Like, and you got to hope that guys don't age out by the time and their bodies are broken down by, let's say 2023 is like their, the Bruins 2023 is going to be their apex, right? And so their climax is coming soon. They got to be healthy for it, right? Does everyone hold up for that? So I do think, sorry to go off on a tangent about the Atlantic here, but like the Atlantic is very much up for grabs in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think the Bruins looking at that 2 to 3 year timeline, and they're looking at this as the low point. I imagine they're going to be players on the right side. If Neil Pionk hits the open market, do they get in that mix? I imagine that they're not going to use all these draft picks. If they do, hey, more power to them. I like the idea, but do you maybe try to parlay a couple of these seconds, maybe one of the first, and you bring in, a high-end center? We had a caller today on the Sports Hub, the Shaw's and Star Market hockey show on the Sports Hub that mentioned Matty Beniers in Seattle. Like, is that the next big fish that you kind of, well, I'll talk about Brady Tkachuk, but if you can't get Tkachuk, what about Matty Beniers, in Seattle?
Sick contract.
It's a good contract,
It's a
good
sick
two-way
contract.
player, young. Like, is that
From
a guy
Hingham?
you guy? Yeah, is that a guy you try to target? So their options are open. I can't see what we're gonna see for the next 20 games though being the norm for this franchise. They don't believe in that being their norm.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's definitely I'd still categorize it as a retool. I think when you have a guy who, as you've seen this year should validate how much of a freak David Pastrnak is. He has got 50 points in his last 33 games with this roster. Like, he is a beast. That's why I'm also like, hell, put Casey Middlestad with him, and like maybe he'll be a 70-point guy. Who get, like, again, there's guys who get elevated by putting these players in those spots, but I do think when you have guys like that, you have guys like McAvoy and Lindholm and Swayman, which again, that is the big key of where exactly this team is going. You need him to bounce back, and I feel more confident of him not being, I don't think next year he's going to have a 924 save percentage, but he's a lot better than what he's shown this year. And I think there's been a lot of bullshit this year. I think a lot of guys are just can't wait to get into next year, whether it's him, whether it's guys that are banged up. Not even like, guys like McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm, but like Elias Lindholm was treading water and had to play catch up early on this year. He was hurt. There's just a lot of guys that, not saying that next year, willy-nilly, Elias Lindholm's going to be a 70-point guy. Swayman's going to be going for the Vezina. I'm not saying that, but I just feel like everyone does need to reset the guys that have been here long-term or are signed long-term. And yeah, I agree that they have options now. And again, it's all about what the Bruins do with these picks, right? They have to hit on these picks in this upcoming draft. They got to, if they're making trades and trying to replicate what the Capitals did, they got to hit on them, right? You have to have trades similar to like the Zacha move, where you're finding maybe it's a depressed asset that can give more in a new place. And so they have to make the most of it. Like, it's almost like there's a lot of excitement, but you have to make good on what you now have, which is a really good foundation and a lot of assets at your disposal. But, I kind of view almost like the Bruins now as maybe where they were in like 16, 17, where it's a lot of new faces, a lot of, you're not sure what exactly you have, but if you make the playoffs and you go into a first round and a lot of younger players and new faces, cut their teeth and get better, I think you'd view that as a success. And then you're poised for 27, 28, where hopefully the guys you drafted this year are stepping into greater roles, or if guys like Minton or players like that can continue to develop, you're on the right path of where you are when you already have a couple of guys already in their prime. So I do view it more as a retool as opposed to a complete rebuild, but it also now just falls on the Bruins to make the most of it. They've done, I guess, the first hot pot. They ripped off the Band-Aid, but like, still got to stop the bleeding moving forward. And it's all about what you have to do now to capitalize on the situation you've put yourself in, but also the opportunity that you created for yourself with all of these picks at your disposal. So it's exciting, right? It's exciting, but also there's the threat of what happens if this goes wrong. If you whiff on these picks, if you trade for guys that aren't moving the needle, if you do what you did last year, which you thought that you could spend in free agency and cover up these holes, and it's investing in the wrong guys. If it's, guys like Minton or Hushmadinov or players like that, Zellers, aren't what they are, that is absolutely on the table, and that could be the case. And then all of a sudden things can go haywire. But the Bruins had to make moves like they did on Friday, and they put themselves in a new spot and an opportunity to kind of forge a new chapter moving forward. And I think there's some excitement to that. It might mean that these next 18 games aren't going to be that much fun, but if it ends up with you getting a high draft pick and a clean slate this offseason, it should be a lot of fun, I will say. If the Bruins bottom out next year, then we'll make fun of me for saying that, but you had to do something. And I think there is a lot of excitement that comes with what is next for this team moving forward.
It's an excellent point, Connor. And I think what's really important here to consider is that it's not quite the same. I understand that. This is basically 2015 2.0 in terms of the opportunity that is in front of the franchise now, where you bring in all the draft picks, you bring in the high-end prospects, you really sort of just replenish your pipeline potential, right? Go back to 2015. We all talk about the the picks 13, 14, and 15, they had 7 of the first 75 picks in that year's draft. They had 3 first-round picks, and they had 3 second-round picks, right? And we know what happened in the first round. They got 1 NHL player out of that, Jake DeBrusk. But in the second round, they got Jacob Forsbacka-Karlsson, they got Brandon Carlo, and they got Jeremy Lauzon. So they got 2 NHL defensemen out of that second round. Even look at the third round. They got goaltender Daniel Vladar, who they ended up parlaying into a trade that they brought in the third round pick, which I want to say they ended up trading down the road for somebody else. But nevertheless, like, you have replenished the asset pipeline. Now it's about making sure you get at least two high impact NHL players by hook or by crook. Get them through the draft, use them in a trade, but use them to get legitimate NHL players, because right now you have David Pastrnak in the prime of his career. You have a healthy Charlie McAvoy, in theory, in the prime of his career. And Jeremy Swayman, he's still young, man. I'm not giving it up. I'm not giving up on him just yet. I need to see him with a normal training camp, a more normal offseason, and get his game and his mind centered. And if you do that, you can really get this thing going up again. But this is 2015 all over again. Sweeney is getting a second chance at rebuilding the pipeline. And now he's got to not fuck it up. And I know that's difficult, but like this is he's getting a second chance. He's getting a second chance. Whether he deserves it or not is a different story. But did you learn from your mistakes? Did you learn from what happened in 2015? 2015 is his scarlet letter, and now he has a chance to basically undo it. And if he can do that, credit where credit is due, baby. I'll give him the credit, but I got to see it happen.
Yep. No, it is going to be, again, I think really fascinating. We're going to have, I think, a lot of fun looking at just what is next for this team, whether it's these final games, these younger players that are going to be stepping up. There should be some excitement, I think, with where this team is going to be moving forward. It's going to be a very different team in September. And even if we're expecting a lot of growing pains along the way, it feels like the Bruins are at least building towards something. It feels like, especially like last year, before like they just got off to that great start, and even this year, once the realization started setting in of like, wow, the bill is coming due. Like, we know this is coming. It's here. It's the Band-Aid has been ripped off, but now it feels like, again, don't clip this if it goes wrong. It feels like they're now starting from scratch, but moving upwards. There can only be more younger players, new faces coming in that should help supplement what you have, which is a really, really good core of players like Pastrnak and McAvoy. And it should be exciting. We've been praying for guys like Georgi Merkulov and Fabian Lysell. Well, add guys like Fraser Minton and Hushmadinov, and people will be clipping highlights of Will Zellers next year at North Dakota. And if they get a Roger McQueen or an O'Brien, or hell, if they bump up the lottery and get a Misa or a Hagens or something like that, there's going to be a lot of guys that I think Bruins fans, I think, will be entertained by what they have, which is a new product on the ice moving forward, and also hope for the future. And I think that's scary but exciting. And I think we'll have a lot to talk about moving forward. So, Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at 95thesportshub.com and on the air at 95thesportshub. Obviously, listen on our app as well if you're out of market. You can also hear me again on the Sports Hub, the Shaw's and Star Market Hockey Show on the Sports Hub every Saturday morning, 9 to 11 a.m. Today was a hectic day. A hectic call screener was broken on me. But next week we'll be talking more about the Bruins and the future that is in front of this club right now, which is, at the end of the day, brighter than it was at Friday at 2 p.m. As bitter a pill as that is to swallow, we got a lot of got to get our peepers peeled for what's happening here down the road here with the Boston Bruins.
Yep, it is a new era. Absolutely. And yes, if you guys want to read my stuff, you can go over to boston.com or the Boston Globe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever the hell it's called, you can over at Conor Ryan _93. Almost forgot it. My brain is also fried, Ty.
It's broken. Broken brains.
Yeah. We need a little bit of rest here. But Ty, thank you once again for talking hockey. This was episode 310 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.